Hello, welcome to Books and Brews,
the place where beer and literature meet.
with your host, certified Cicerone Michael Agnew.
And Laura Vosica, author of the Bluebells Chronicles.
Each month we invite a guest author to read their words and talk about writing while sipping beers specially paired with their work.
Today's guest is Robert Bidinotto.
So sit back,
Pop a cold one,
and dive into some books
and brews.
And so that means we are good to go. Welcome everybody to episode 42.
Yes, 42.
Of the Books and Brews podcast. How's your month been, Laura?
Well, my month has been very busy. As you know, we are building up a homestead, so we got our rabbits.
Literally a homestead. You're like homesteaders
Yes.
there with chickens and goats. And
We don't have the goats yet, but we got the rabbits since I saw you last. And they are adorable. And I just, want to kiss them and pet them. And one of them of me, so her official name is now Scaredy Pants. We got a tractor. So, and I don't mean a little tractor. I don't mean like
a real tractor.
Or I mean a real tractor, yeah. So the salesman's like, "Do you want to try it?" I'm like, "No, that's the guy. I have to." So, I got to drive around the parking lot in a tractor. And Chris, of course, is having the time of his life, taking it back on the trails and things. And yes, we started harvesting. You asked about my lovely display behind me.
Yes.
I'm excited.
I should take a screenshot of that here.
Yes.
So
we have cucumbers. We have jalapenos. We have tomatoes. We've got, oops, there it goes. I don't know if this is a pumpkin or a squash or what. We accidentally.
A squash of some kind.
I think it was coming from the pumpkin patch. The problem is we picked it too early. We've got some butternut squash here.
Mm-hmm.
We've been having butternut squash soup and all kinds of stuff. And then this is actually my daughter-in-law's, but we do have green peppers out in the garden. And then we discovered a single lone apple tree. And
wow.
5 million apples. So this is apple cider, and it is the best apple cider I've ever had in my life. This is going to be apple vodka in about 3 weeks.
Nice. So did you press the apples yourselves?
For the vodka, you just chop them up and toss them in there. But yeah, we bought an apple cider press.
Wow.
And we discovered we probably should have had about 10 times as many apples in there because that's all we got was the one jar of apple cider.
No, you need a lot of apples to make cider.
I know. I said, I can see why nobody was obese 100 years ago. You had to work way too hard for your food.
Mm-hmm.
Took us like 2 hours to get this one little jar of apple cider. So
that's all very exciting. Mostly what I'm harvesting now is Thai chili peppers, and I've got
that sounds good.
Little baggie of Thai chili peppers that I don't know what to do with because I haven't made Thai food in a little while. And
time to start.
They're super hot, so I can't put them in a lot of things or Masako won't eat it.
Seriously, she doesn't like spicy food?
She likes a little spice, but not nearly as much as I do.
Well, Chris always asks, when we go to a Thai restaurant, they're like, on a scale of 1 to 5, how spicy? He's like 11.
Yeah, exactly. Me too. That's
he would love that.
Yeah.
So did you read anything this month? You were on tour.
I was on tour, and so tour was hectic, as it always is. It's just 3 weeks of intensive travel, and 3 weeks in which I played banjo like twice. So now getting back to it, it's like trying to get my fingers on both hands to do what they're supposed to do. Is quite the challenge.
I bet. Yeah, it comes back quickly, though, because I finally started playing my harp again for the first time since we moved here more than a year ago. Well, we've been here like a year and weeks now. And I finally started playing my harp again. And I was pleased it came back quickly, because I have a lot of pieces that were performance ready.
You were better at it to start with than I was.
I did have like a 25-year head start.
So
I'd be very sad if I weren't.
and I had my last lesson right before going on tour. So I have 2 songs to learn for this lesson cycle.
Oh boy.
And they're like just now starting to sound like songs.
Oh, that's good though.
Yeah.
That's good. So you've got a week or so.
Yeah, they're coming.
Yeah.
So yeah, I didn't read anything.
Well, I was a reading machine, and I'll go through them really quickly. Actually, I'll just give you the highlights. I read one book that I don't even remember the title, but we ended up calling it Timid Tim, the Inept Magician, because he spent the book going, well, I don't actually know how to do that kind of magic. Well, I would like to save us all, but I don't actually know how to do that kind of magic. I don't know. And so everybody else is saving him. And I'm like, you're supposed to be a magician.
Is that the intent of the book, or is it just
it's I don't know. It's a series. So I don't know if it's meant to be like a coming of age book where he gets better, but everybody else is all saving him and he's the main character. You know, so anyway, then I read, I'll skip ahead to the other kind of highlight. I just picked this up at an antique store the other day. It's a very old book called Old Nutriment. And it is the story of the aide and personal helper of General George Custer and his wife, Elizabeth. And so it's a fascinating book because he's kind of telling about his own life, but he's somebody who knew and lived with the Custers for 10 years or close to 10 years.
Wow.
So it's a really interesting look at what Custer was like just as a person. So very fascinating.
Yeah. Who's our guest?
Well, I am very excited, just as I am every month, to introduce our guest. And I forgot to put my writing in like 15-point font. So I have to, get over the vanity and put on the glasses. We have with us today,
I'll take a lot of screenshots right now.
No. This is the part that's not going in the outtakes. Robert Bidinotto is known as the vigilante author. How can that not be exciting? He is the author of the best-selling, and I do mean best-selling, Dylan Hunter vigilante thriller series. His debut novel, Hunter, soared to the top of the Kindle bestseller list and was a Wall Street Journal top 10 fiction ebook. Its sequel, Bad Deeds, became a #1 Audible thriller. The third installment in the series is the political suspense novel, Winner Takes All. Before turning to fiction, Robert produced decades of award-winning nonfiction journalism, earned a national reputation as an authority on crime while writing investigative articles for, I've got that line from, what's that movie with Ben Stiller and Hansel? He's so hot right now, Zoolander. Investigative, you know that line I'm talking about, investigatory journalism. That's a side note. So anyway, he gained a reputation as an authority on crime while writing investigative articles for Reader's Digest. One of those was named a finalist for a National Magazine Award by the American Society of Magazine Editors. Robert also wrote 2 acclaimed nonfiction books about criminal justice. As editor of the New Individualist magazine, he won the prestigious Folio Gold Eddy Award for editorial excellence. He lives on the Chesapeake Bay, where he is writing the further adventures of Dylan Hunter. So welcome, Robert. I am thrilled.
Welcome.
Laura, Michael, thank you so much for the invitation. I very much appreciate being here, and also sharing a little of your favorites.
What type of beer do you have there?
So nice to be meeting you face to face for the first time.
Yes.
You too. What kind of beer do you have there?
This is not beer.
Oh, it's not.
This is Johnny Walker Black.
Oh,
I was gonna say,
okay.
it looks like bourbon or scotch or something.
It's Scotch.
Hey, we've had some beer in interesting colors. So
All right, it's that or my red wine, whichever.
that's what I will have later this evening.
So you were going to ask me what the first beer is.
I was going to, and in fact, I did. You didn't hear me.
I did, but you didn't get all the way through the question.
Oh, I'm sorry. I cut myself off.
The first beer So all three pairings today are name pairings. It's just there were a lot of beer names. Just made sense to go with the readings. So the first pairing is from Rogue Brewing in Oregon, and it is their old classic Dead Guy Ale.
Have we had this before?
I believe we have. We've had two of them before that we're having today.
Okay,
So,
I thought two names sounded familiar. Well, I knew the picture was familiar. I
yeah.
didn't remember the name, but I remembered the picture.
So this is they call it a Maibach, except, so a Maibach is typically a lager, German style lager, except this one is brewed as an ale. So it's a Maibach that's brewed as an ale. The reason for this pairing will become obvious when the reading happens. It's because there's a prominent dead guy who is kind of the reason that the thing is occurring. So that's the point of this pairing. So cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers to you.
And what do you think, Laura?
What did I think last time?
I have no idea. It was a long time ago when I poured this last time.
I suspect that 3.5 years ago, I would have hated it.
Mm-hmm.
So see, you're continuing to have an impact.
But you don't hate it.
Well, it would have to be a hot day and I'd have to be really sick of water. And then I would go, okay, that's okay.
This one goes way. This is like
Sour.
an old craft beer. This is early craft beer era. This was when this first came out.
I probably wouldn't make a point of buying it again.
Okay. It's a little more bitter than you like.
It is. It definitely is. And in fact, I have an interesting one to tell you about when we get to it. Robert, we are ready for your first reading, which is The Funeral.
Right. This is not the kind of dead guy that Michael was looking forward to. This is more or less the exciting incident that gets the thing going in the story. And the scene introduces the hero, Dylan Hunter, the vigilante character in the book. It takes place early in the novel at a funeral home. A plastic surgeon, Arthur Copeland, a CIA consulting physician, has died, and numerous CIA officials have arrived to pay their respects to their former colleague and to his widow, Susie. And accompanying Susie is her best friend, a CIA security investigator, Annie Woods. And this scene is described from Annie's point of view. Her eyes roamed the endless line still wending its way into the parlor, then rested on a man framed in the doorway. He was not exceptionally tall, but his lean physique made him look so. He had an arresting face, dark curly hair, craggy features, a somewhat broad nose, gaunt cheeks, and eyes that moved constantly and seemed to be taking in everything. They rested on the agency bosses circulating among the seated guests. She saw or imagined some fleeting expression cross his face before he turned and moved toward the casket. Susie asked her for another cup of water, so Annie headed to the water cooler. As she returned, she noticed that the man was standing over Arthur Copeland's body. He did not kneel. He simply remained there a long time, motionless, hands jammed in the pockets of his long, dark cloth coat. Finally, he turned away to join the receiving line. His glance met hers, and she looked away quickly as if she had been caught. When the man reached Susie, he took her hand in both of his. "Mrs. Copeland," he said in a soft baritone, "I join your husband's many friends and admirers in sharing your grief." "Thank you so much. Forgive me, Arthur knew so many people. You are," "I'm sorry, Dylan Hunter." And how did you know my husband, Mr. Hunter?" He hesitated just an instant. "I met him in a professional capacity." "Oh, you're a doctor then?" "Oh." She glanced knowingly toward the CIA chiefs now heading toward the exit. I think I understand. I'm a journalist, you see," he interrupted smoothly, "and your husband was helpful to me once with some medical research. It was for an important story I was working on. I regret I never had the opportunity to tell him just how grateful I was. I came by to pay my respects to him and to you. He was the man paused. He was someone I can't forget. Thank you. It's so nice of you to tell me that. Arthur touched so many people. He smiled at that. He lifted Susie's hand gently in both of his and kissed it. Then he turned to her. Hello, Dylan Hunter. I'm so terribly sorry for your loss. His eyes were hazel green and locked onto hers. She suddenly felt awkward. Actually, I'm just a friend of Susie's. I mean, of course, it is a great loss to all of us. Thank you. Her words felt clumsy, but he nodded, still holding her eyes. She suddenly felt aware of her body, found her hand moving instinctively toward her hair before she caught herself and extended it to him instead. He took her hand. His was big and warm and strong. He held hers and he held her eyes. Then he released her hand and her eyes and was gone. She watched his receding figure as he strode toward the exit. He wore black, low-cut boots. His long, loose cloth coat tapered down from his shoulders, falling cape-like behind him. So that's the introduction of Dylan Hunter, the hero of the novel.
You know, the very first question that came to my mind, which was, not among my many profound planned questions, was, is this an Audible book?
It is, and I wish that I had the voice of my narrator.
That's hilarious because my question was...
Narrator. I have an absolutely fantastic Audible narrator for Hunter, which is the name of the book, and for the two sequels, Bad Deeds and Winner Takes All. And he does them all, and he is just absolutely fantastic. I picked him precisely because I envisioned in my mind Dylan and his voice. And this guy absolutely nails Dylan's voice a whole lot better than I would.
It's funny.
I'm going to have to listen.
I was sitting here thinking, wow, this sounds like many a book on tape I've listened to.
I was thinking the same exact thing. I was going to ask, did you narrate it yourself? Because I thought you did a great job.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And I only, I would have saved a lot of money if I'd have done it myself. But,
well, I understand.
Actually not. What happens when you're narrating in a studio, if you don't know what you're doing and I don't know what I'm doing, I tend to stammer a lot like Jimmy Stewart, and they would have to go back and re-record and re-record and re-record. Studio time would eat up all my profits. So I'm glad that I didn't do that.
So I wanted to throw in a comment, not a question. You're in Chesapeake Bay. Yeah, I grew up in the Air Force. And so my dad was stationed at Andrews Air Force Base for 3 years. And we had a neighbor who took us out on Chesapeake Bay. And one of my earliest things I wrote was based on that trip on his boat, the Sea Turtle. And it's called, I should have brought it. It's sitting on my shelf. It's called The Night the Sea Turtle Went Down. And it was a class assignment. And I rolled it up and stuffed it in a bottle and turned it in like that, as if, they had written the story and put it in a bottle. So I totally should have had that as a great visual display, but maybe next month. But I have a question about, you open book one with this quote. It says, most of the harm in the world is done by good people and not by accident, lapse, or omission. It is the result of their deliberate actions, long persevered in, which they hold to be motivated by high ideals toward virtuous ends. That's a quote from Isabel Patterson in The God of the Machine. Do you believe most harm is done deliberately by good people? And if you do, why?
I don't think it's done deliberately by good people. I think it's done by good people in the sense that there is a key line in Hunter that explains the theme. The theme of the book is justice, but he puts it this way. He said that Edmund Burke, the great statesman in the 19th century, it was wrong. His quote was, all that is necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. Dylan Hunter says he had it wrong. All that is necessary for the triumph of evil is an enabler. And in my life, I have found that that is absolutely the case, that well-meaning people, and sometimes not so well-meaning, but out of cowardice, enable the bad guys, however you want to define the bad guys, enable them to get away with what they get away with. Mm-hmm. And without the assistance of the enablers, most bad guys are losers and they can't get away with much. And so this book is essentially about not only the bad guys, but their enablers. And what distinguishes this book, this vigilante book, from just about any other that you're going to think of is that Dylan Hunter, the hero, goes after not just the bad guys, the criminals, the ones that we would all agree are bad guys, but he also goes after their enablers, not with the kind of violence that he would go after a bad guy with, but he gives them poetic justice for what the evil the harm that they have caused. You remember the whole not Jeffrey Epstein, the fellow in Hollywood.
Weinstein.
Harvey Weinstein.
Yeah.
He is a classic example of how enablers throughout the Hollywood industry allowed him to get away with his predatory behavior for so many years. I mean, decades. It was like an open secret. Everybody knew about it, but they let him get away with it. And that is the essence of the message in Hunter, that without that support, these guys would not be able to continue doing the bad things and the harm that they're doing.
This is all so startlingly immediate right now.
Isn't it? I was thinking the same thing. And I was thinking this should really make us all think, because I'm sure there are times everyone has been afraid to take a stand, to, do whatever, because people are going to be mad at you. People are, going to threaten you, whatever.
Right.
It is very timely.
It's timely, but something, looking at history, I think that lesson, Dylan Hunter's lesson about all that is necessary for the triumph of evil as an enabler, I think if you look at history closely, you'll find that it's always been relevant, that this sort of thing always happens. My favorite play and film is A Man for All Seasons. The 1967 version of the film version of the play is wonderful. And it's like a study, Henry VIII versus Sir Thomas More. And they wanted Thomas More to essentially play the enabler role. He lost his life because he refused to do so, but everybody else did. And they enabled Henry VIII to cut off a lot of heads.
Right, and burn a lot of people. Actually, that's the book I started this month. It's called Lamentations, and I can't remember the author, but it's exactly about his last wife, Catherine Parr, and how she wrote, which she actually did write this manuscript called Lamentations. And it's talking about how very dangerous it is and how everybody wants to just duck their head. And you can understand why when this book opens with 4 people being burned to death. And the author describes it quite vividly.
When I wrote these books, I mean, they are fast-moving action thrillers. There's a lot of action, a lot of violence, but there's also a solid romance. The reason I picked that excerpt is I wanted to put Annie Woods, who turns out to be the romantic interest. I wanted to put her on stage early in the book, and the hero. And there's an ongoing romance throughout the series, which is very unusual for a thriller writer, especially a male thriller writer, to have an ongoing romance. Normally in a thriller, what happens is that a woman is either the James Bond plaything for the weekend, or in chapter 5, she is killed by the bad guys, which provokes the hero to go off on a crusade of revenge against the bad guys for the rest of the book. But they usually don't have that much of a life expectancy. And I took lessons from like Robert B. Parker and others who managed to write thrillers and mysteries with long long enduring romantic relationships. And
I would just like to give a shout out to Ross Terry, who was in my writers group, and we teased him all the time that all the women died, even his female dogs died. Females don't survive in Ross's books.
well, they don't survive in very many thriller writers' books, especially if they're writing series thrillers. Usually has to prompt the guy to go off on a maniacal crusade of revenge. And so many thriller movies are the same way, and it gets a little stale after a while. And I wanted to break that pattern, and I'm pleased to say that I have probably as many or more female fans as I do male fans, and that's one of the reasons it was named. It hit #1 in romantic suspense on Kindle also. So,
which is pretty impressive.
I was very pleased.
Move on to beer number 2.
Number 2 in romance. So, I was very pleased about it. I was up against some stiff competition with a lot of the lady romance writers, and
yes, that is tough competition.
Right.
Let's move on to beer number 2.
Beer number 2.
Yes.
I got to unmute. Beer number 2, now that I'm unmuted. Beer number 2 is another name pairing. This is from Revolution Brewing in Chicago. The name of this beer is A Little Crazy.
I got the closest thing I could find.
Yeah, that's way far off.
Is it? Well, it's a Belgian pale ale. It's a Belgian style pale ale.
Yeah, not the same thing. The name of the beer just corresponds to what the protagonist in the next reading is about to do. And by his own admission says it's a little crazy. So this is a Belgo style pale ale. It is an American pale ale fermented with a Belgian yeast strain. It's hopped with Citra hops, so it's very lemon lime hop character. It's pretty aggressively bitter. You would not like this one, Laura.
Well, I may not like this one. Like I said, I asked for the closest thing. I said the beer I'm supposed to have. What's the closest thing?
But what's making this one really delightful is that Belgian yeast. So you get this kind of puffy, I call it puffy, cotton candy, black pepper thing going on underneath all the hops, and this is really
This has
good.
cinnamon.
This is the first time I've had this. I'm liking this a lot.
Okay. Oh,
So
you
which
already
beer do you
tried
have?
it?
What do you have, Laura?
What I have, and again, we asked I called probably 7 stores
Yeah.
here, and the closest we found was New Belgium triple, if you can see it.
Yeah. A triple.
So
That's not the same.
it's not going to be even close, huh? So are we talking like beer and wine not the same, or are we talking like beer and cows not the same?
Beer and cows. So
Okay.
no, beer and wine maybe. So you've had IPAs that you don't like because they're really aggressively hoppy and bitter. So this is that with the same sort of fruit and spice character that your beer has.
I think this could grow on me. My first reaction was, but
No, the Belgian triple, you should like that actually.
I think it will definitely grow on me. And so, we got a variety pack. So maybe I'll finish this one tonight and Chris can have the rest.
Yeah, there you go. You would hate this one, but I'm sure you'll like that one.
That one's not bad. I would consider buying it again on a really hot day. And so, Robert, we are ready for reading number 2 from Bad Deeds.
Okay, and you can save some Guinness for me because I really enjoy Guinness.
We have a stout coming up next. So
Cliche for your audience, but at any rate, you like what you like.
I love Guinness.
This excerpt is from the second book, Bad Deeds. The scene takes place after Dylan Hunter and his lover, Annie Woods, barely escaped being murdered by political terrorists. And a scientist friend of theirs was assassinated by a bomb placed by one of the terrorists. Dylan has been invited by one of the suspected conspirators to a meeting at the man's office. And he realizes he's probably walking into a trap. But he's furious and he's tempted to confront his enemies anyway. So He's a little crazy. He had been circling the block in the BMW since 5:15. He watched the steady flow of cars from the building's garage entrance until about 5:30. Then a slowing drain of vehicles until 5:45, when it became a mere trickle. On another pass 5 minutes later, he spotted them. They'd been gathered outside a couple of parked cars in an unmanned open lot across the street. There were 4 of them, dressed down and wearing hoodies, looking over at the garage entrance. He zipped the BMW around the building again, and on his return pass, they were going in, one at a time, to avoid attracting attention. He pulled his car to the curb and put on his 4-way flashers. Then he got out and walked over to their parked cars. The bumpers and windows of both vehicles bore decals for the local branch of a building trades union. He returned to the BMW and went around the block to a couple more times, giving them ample time to set up their ambush and more time for him to think this through. He asked himself again, why was he doing this? For a while, he had rationalized that he needed to stir the pot, force their hand, make something happen, but he knew that was a lie. This made no sense, not practically, only emotionally. It had festered for days. He needed to pound the crap out of somebody connected to this, somebody who deserved it. That's why he didn't trust himself to carry weapons to this confrontation. He was afraid he'd be tempted to kill someone. But that meant going in unarmed, stupid, insanely unprofessional. No, he didn't have to accept the after-hours appointment with Sloan. He didn't have to confront these goons. Even now, he could just walk away. Just walk away. Then he remembered the sight of Annie up on the cabin porch, putting the key into the lock beneath the waiting explosive device. Remembered the sight of Adam Silva at the end of the dinner table, eyes twinkling, filled with life and intelligence before the bomb planted at his home tore him apart. He rounded the corner and approached the entrance to the garage. He had always believed that there were moments in one's life when a single decision could set the course of one's future. He knew in his gut that this was such a moment. Hunter's mouth was dry, his hands damp on the steering wheel. He thought of Annie as he drew abreast of the entrance. Keep going. His foot moved from the gas pedal to stomp on the brake, and his hands jerked the wheel. He found himself stopped before the lowered gate arm next to the protruding security keypad. He sat still for a moment. Decision made, he felt himself once again entering that high, remote, cold place where Dylan Hunter became something else. He tapped the security code. The gate rose. The big black BMW prowled forward toward the ramp that led down into his future. Okay.
I love that line that he goes into a different place when he's about to become a vigilante. Exactly is Dylan Hunter's background story? What turns him into a vigilante?
It's a combination of that we'll set up in the first book. That funeral and the man that he visited at that funeral, the person in the coffin that he paid a tribute to, did something for him that was profoundly important to his life. And that man committed suicide because of an incident that occurred, an attack, a criminal attack upon him and his wife, Susie. He could not endure what had happened during that attack. It destroyed him emotionally. And the man committed suicide as a result. Hunter could not, that man had meant so much to him that Hunter couldn't tolerate that. Hunter has his own background. He has his own, you might say, a background that provided him with the special set of skills.
Well, that speaks directly to a question that I had. And part of the question was, why are we drawn to these vigilante characters? But also, they're usually larger than life. You know, when you think about Jack Reacher, John Wick, James Reese, even the Scarlet Pimpernel going way back.
Absolutely. Absolutely. This is a classic character. Lee Child talks about this. The idea of the Ronin, the wandering knight errant, the character who goes riding into town like in a Clint Eastwood movie, and up the town, and then like Shane, rides out of town afterwards. We live in a world in which justice is a rare commodity. We live in a world where people yearn for it. They are upset that they don't get it. And the fantasy character, the Zorro, the Batman, the John Wick, the person who comes into this disorder, into this moral chaos with standards, and he sets things right because he has character, he has standards, and he also has those special set of skills, like the Taken movies with Liam Neeson. This is a universal character. You find him transcultural, and that appeal. He never goes away. The Jack Reacher character, and I hope that Dylan Hunter acquires the same kind of currency that Jack Reacher did. But those kinds of characters speak to our basic need for justice. And that's one of the reasons why those are very, very common fantasies and very, very common themes and characters in novels and in films. And I wish that more films were a little more original than they are, more stories, because a lot of them are just, the guy's out for revenge and bang, 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 and it's nothing but a shoot 'em up. And the John Wick movies is an example. And you can do so much more with them. And I try to do a whole lot more with my stories. And
I believe you have quite a background an interest in the theme of justice, going back to your childhood in philosophy and psychology.
Yes.
And to me, that sounds like you have the perfect background to bring something more. So what is the something more that you bring to just running around killing everybody who wronged you?
Right. Well, it's the interesting thing about the Dylan Hunter character is he is a reluctant hero. He is a reluctant vigilante. He didn't plan to do this. It just sort of happened because he was the right person in the right place at the right time to see that justice was done when the entire system had broken down and people who meant something to him weren't getting justice. Now that's pretty common, but I think several things set Dylan Hunter apart from the usual vigilante character. Number one, his background. When he went to college, he went to Princeton and he majored in political philosophy. So he was a very educated young man and could have gone on to become a scholar, a teacher, or something like that. And then during the first time that the World Trade Center was attacked, he was recruited into the CIA by a person who was on the staff of Princeton University, who was watching him and saw that he had such extraordinary talents. And so he was recruited into the CIA, and he went off to do that. And when he came back because of circumstances that happened out there downrange that were their own kinds of injustice. And he couldn't tolerate that anymore. So he left. But when he came back, he finds his friends being harmed. Now, that's a kind of a background also that's fairly familiar. There are a lot of those kinds of things where the war hero comes back and he takes care of business after he comes back. But there are two things I think that set Dylan apart. He understands the parameters of vigilante action. It's not something that he enjoys or wants to take. Philosophically, he's thought this through. He has a code. There are things he will not do. He will not harm anybody who hasn't harmed somebody else. He will not use mortal violence, lethal violence against somebody who has not killed somebody else or been in a conspiracy to kill somebody else. He will not do anything that will allow anybody else, innocent people, to be put in jeopardy. If he has to walk away from a mission because there are innocent people around, he will do that. And he will never attack the police, even in self-defense or to get away. If they catch him, so be it. That goes with the territory. Finally, I think there's the other thing about him is that the romance. You do not find a character. Imagine a vigilante, a guy who is you might say, has this avocation as a vigilante, trying to sustain a long-term relationship. Mm-hmm. How does that work? That was a real challenge. And I'll be honest with you, Laura, I did not intend or imagine that I would be writing romance into the story when I first thought of it many years ago. And
I have often found that characters tend to kind of do what they want to do. And I think when you read a character who's very realistic, I mean, I've said this of my own books, that in book 2, Angus walked in and started talking to Amy. And I often said he caused me so much trouble, but he simply would not allow me to write him out. He caused me trouble because I didn't know how to work him into the story, but he walked in and he wasn't going to leave. And I think characters have a mind of their own.
Have a mind of their own. And I will say that I thought of this. I said, I thought of this in advance, though. And I sort of sucked it up that I had to write a romance into this because I asked myself, what would be the deepest kind of conflict that this character could undergo? Mm-hmm. Emotional conflict, inner conflict. I didn't want his conflicts to just be external with the bad guys and with their enablers. I wanted him, that's, I should say, is the other thing. The enablers going after enablers of evil is very unusual. I don't know of other writers of vigilante fiction who do that. But
no, I've never heard of that. We do need to move on to beer 3 just because, as Michael said, we can only get an hour of work, which is unfortunate because
you just want to get to your drinking. Don't tease.
You got me.
And speaking of, so the next beer, again, name pairing. Once the reading happens, the reason for this pairing will become completely apparent. This is from Prairie Artisan Ales in St. Louis. It is called Bomb.
Okay.
This is the one. This is the other one that we have poured before.
It's the bomb.
That is okay. So that's a different version of Bomb. You've got
the only difference, I was told, and you are right, Robert, I do want to get to drinking this. Yeah. I was told it is absolutely identical to Bomb, but it has nutmeg for Christmas.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Bomb, minus the nutmeg, is a 13% imperial stout aged on coffee, cocoa and vanilla beans, cocoa nibs and vanilla beans, and chili peppers.
Wow.
So it's a beer with a lot of stuff going on, and it's also very high alcohol. And Laura, this is your beer if there's going to be a beer.
I just looked at it because I have figured out that if the deer is bark, okay, I've had too much. If the beer is dark, and you notice it matches my fingernail polish.
It does. That's beautiful. Even with the foam and the stripe across your fingernails. It's
right, exactly.
I need to get a picture of that.
Yeah, well, there it is. Chris requested autumn colors for my fingernail polish, so I got autumn colors. You got your picture?
I did.
Excellent. Yeah, I looked at come out and I went, it's dark beer. I bet I'm gonna. So, let me get my other one. Cheers.
That is great choreography of the all aids here. I love that. Good job, Laura.
Well, we have to do this in person again. Now that we did it, a couple months ago, we did it in the same room.
You get to the DC or Annapolis area, we'll do it.
DC is hot. Like I said, I lived there for 3 years, and I have always thought it was like being locked in a sauna for like 3.5 months.
You just got to come during the fall or the spring.
Well, I lived in St. Louis.
Oh, was that pretty hot and steamy too?
Oh, it's horrific in the summer.
Yeah, I do not like heat and humidity. So I'm now up in Duluth where, we're looking at having frost in about a night or two. So we have to get all the herbs picked and out and everything covered up. So, maybe in January, I'll come down and visit you. And then I'll be like, this is nice.
There you go.
Time. Yeah, we're ready for reading number 3.
Okay, book number 3 is the most complex of all of them. It is a big cast, big stage in Washington, D.C., a big political thriller. And in this scene, Dylan Hunter is meeting in a conference room with the staff of a nonprofit investigative group when he spots a white rental truck pulled to the curb outside. He's seen it on the way in, and it looks suspicious to him. Now, bearded men armed with rifles jump out and then begin to run away from the truck. Hunter bolted to his feet, knocking his chair backward. "Everyone, get out of the room now!" The staff sat frozen, gaping as if he'd gone mad. He grabbed the front of Deaver's shirt and tie, yanking him upward, pointing out the window. "Terrorist outside! Run! Go out the back exit! Get out now!" They all spun toward the window, saw what he saw. The girl seated across from him screamed. He propelled Deaver toward the room entrance and then pointed at her. "Out the back door! Go, go, go!" She leaped to her feet and stumbled after Deaver. It was bedlam. The rest all jumped up at once, piling into each other, tripping over the chairs, shoving each other out toward the doorway. "Run out the back and keep running!" Hunter shouted above the din, pushing a young man past him, the last person on his side. He raced out into the foyer, following the stragglers down the hallway. Hatcher, overweight, was lumbering and limping as the others pushed past him and out the wide open exit door. Hunter caught up with him. There was no time to explain. He grabbed his shoulder, arresting his progress, and before the big man could know what was happening, Hunter crouched, wrapped his left arm beneath his thighs, and lifted him like a baby. He burst outside and saw that they had emerged into a private parking lot for a church at the far end of the block. "Keep running! They got a bomb! Go, go!" He was unaware of the man's weight, unaware of anything but the desperate need to put more distance between themselves and that truck. He was charging through a section crowded with parked cars when a white flash lit the church before him, and a sudden vibration rocked his feet, and then an enormous ear-splitting thunderclap and a wall of air knocked him forward, and they crashed to the pavement between two vehicles. Hunter's ears were ringing from the blast, and piercing car alarms were going off around him. He pushed Hatcher away and rolled himself against one of the car tires, closing his eyes and covering his head with his arms. Debris rained down, big fragments of things thumping onto the cars, smacking against the pavement around him, just missing him. The crashing noises almost drowned out by the ringing din in his ears. Then came smaller pieces that hit like hailstones, some finding his back and scalp and arms. Then a rolling fog of choking dust and accompanying stench of acrid chemicals and smoke. When the debris stopped falling, he rolled out and sat up, squinting and coughing. Despite his girth, Hatcher had somehow squashed himself face first, almost completely under the pickup truck next to him. At least he was alive. Hunter rose to his feet. Chunks of unrecognizable rubble were strewn all around him and on the cars and pavement. The smoking and falling dust were leaving a chalky, choking coating on every surface. Strips of pink insulation and sheets of burnt paper fluttered down like confetti. He turned and looked back toward the building, or where it had been. The The 4-story structure had collapsed into a single-story mound of smoking, flaming ruins.
I really enjoyed that scene. It's very vivid, very descriptive. One thing, I always prepare way more questions than we can ask in an hour. And so I actually want to back up to questions I had hoped to ask you earlier.
Sure.
And that is, or not really ask you a question, but invite you to tell the reader. A lot of people have written, there are only so many plots. There are only 3 plots, only 7, only 20, only 36. Excuse me. The Cinderella plot.
Mm-hmm.
It's the kind of rags to riches. And I think it's an absolutely fascinating story how you spent your life writing nonfiction, writing for Reader's Digest, things like this. And then you kind of had a to rags sort of situation. And then you started writing Dylan Hunter. Can you tell our 6.8 million listeners about that?
When I had lived all my life admiring these hero stories, read Joseph Campbell's Hero with 1,000 Faces and all of that. And from my childhood, watching Zorro and the Lone Ranger, this was just this whole idea of the lone wolf vigilante character who was meant to restore justice in an unjust world just resonated with me. And to be honest with you, a lot of my nonfiction had to do with that. A lot of my crime writing for Reader's Digest and other outlets were involved with a justice theme. So this was not an alien territory to me, but and while I always wanted to write fiction, I was always afraid to do that. And did I lose you here? Or are we just?
I don't know. He just reappeared with a fireplace behind him.
I'm going to turn on a light here because you're probably losing my. Am I getting very dark to you guys?
Well, you're not dark, but everything behind you is.
Okay. All right. I didn't know whether or not I had disappeared. I was working by sunlight out the window here and it's disappeared. Anyway, I had always wanted to write fiction, but I was always too chicken. And I decided in my 60s that if I didn't try, I would hate myself on my deathbed, not knowing what might have happened or what could have happened. And so I had this character of Dylan Hunter. He had a different name then, but rolling around in my head for a long time. Different background, different circumstances. But around the age of, around 2009, I lost a job as a magazine editor. And I decided, I have time on my hands now, and I might as well go ahead and take a crack at this and see whether or not I can throw a Hail Mary pass and an audience would catch it. And believe it or not, it worked out just dandy. Here it is, a first-time novelist at the age of 62, trying his hand at fiction. And I did, and it went to number 4 on Kindle. The only persons ahead of me were a romance writer and the Hunter Games lady. She had.
Oh, yeah. What's her name? I have no clue what her name is.
2 of her 3 books were ahead of me, and I was ahead of her 3rd book. But
that's pretty good.
For a while, I was the alpha male on Kindle, so that was kind of cool too. I was saying to myself, "Lee Child, eat my dust," which was great fun. Anyway, so that was how I got into this, and I found that I really loved doing it, and I've been doing it ever since, and have other things in the works, other Dylan Hunter projects in the works right now, a prequel novel, and also the next one up is actually it explores the whole issue of vigilantism and how it can get out of control. And which, a lot of people will ask me the question, do you endorse this sort of thing? Do you think that vigilante behavior is a good thing? I want to show the dark side of it. And that's going to be book number 4 in the chronological series.
Yeah, I'm really glad you're addressing that, because I do think, on the one hand, yes, sometimes we need justice that is legally hindered.
Yes.
But on the other hand, I just read a story, not going into details, where somebody just decided this person needs to die. Wow. And killed an 18-year-old kid.
Yeah.
Well, this kid did not deserve to die.
Yeah.
There's no reason, but in the mind of the man who killed him, he did. So,
well, yeah, you're right. Dylan has a very clear code about such things. I have described that earlier. But even so, how far will you go in the pursuit of justice? Suppose it's destroying other things of importance in your life. Mm-hmm. Suppose it's harming other things. Are you willing to let an absolutely evil person get away in order to save those other things that are very important to you? And this next novel will address that concern.
Well, and I think your novels, it sounds to me like they will really bring up a lot of things for people to think about. And to me, that's one of the joys of reading fiction, is that you can present ideas that people aren't going to read as nonfiction, and they start thinking about things they would not have otherwise thought about.
Right.
So we are pretty much at the end of our hour. It is time to give links. So Michael, what are your links and what are our links?
My links, I am at aperfectpint.net and aperfectpint on almost nothing else anymore. Deleted almost all of my social media accounts. We are at booksandbrews.net and Brews on Instagram. I have not deleted that one, although I haven't done anything with it at all.
But one day we will. So
one day.
And daily for the day we finally do.
Where are you, Laura?
Oh goodness. I am at, I believe it's lauravosica.com, which you can also get to through Brewbell's Chronicles. Should have eaten more before I had all this beer. Yeah. Brewbellschronicles.com. Although I now I want to write a book, a series called the Brewbell's Chronicles. So yeah, I'm on facebook.com/laura.vosica.author. Gabriel's Horn is on Twitter, Gabriel's Horn Books, if you can spell that BKS. And Robert, where can people find you?
Well, I'm on social media, but I think the simplest way to find me and information about the books, which are available as ebooks, print books, and audiobooks on Amazon and Audible. Easiest way to find me is go to the link hunterthrillers.com. Let's run those two words together, hunterthrillers.com, and you'll find out pretty much everything you need to know about me, about Dylan Hunter, about the series, and there's a lot of other interesting things there, like interviews that I've posted with great thriller authors like Lee Child, Vince Flynn, many, many others that I have done, Brad Thor, thriller authors, very noted people that I've conducted those interviews over the years. And I'm sure that people would find that at hunterthrillers.com.
There's a lot of good stuff there. I can attest to that. And
who do we have next month?
Next month, and you've probably figured out by now, I find a lot of my authors through Military Brats and my time travel page. Mm-hmm. And so this author I found through my Military Brats page, or Books by Brats is actually the page. So we have Connie Kinsey coming up next month. She is a former military brat, which actually stands for British Regimental Attached. I forgot what the T is for, but I bet she can tell us. A brat who has put down deep roots in a converted barn on a dirt road at the top of a hill in West Virginia. That's a lot of clauses.
That is.
Yeah, she lives with 2 dogs and a cat and is pursuing happiness 1 cup of coffee at a time. I can appreciate that. I mean, apart from 1 cup of wine or beer at a time. Primarily a memoirist, the events of her life permeate her work. Her fiction is sometimes described as autofiction, incorporates autobiography in a fictionalized form with endings far from the truth of what really happened, and I should write some of that. In January of 2021, Connie was thrilled to be selected as one of 2 writers in residence for the Museum of the American Military Fly and Learning. I'm sorry. I don't know if you noticed my hand going there. There was a fly on the lamp. Not the American Military Fly, but the Museum of the American Military Family and Learning Center. She works full-time with a children's nonprofit. So she is coming up next month.
Excellent. That sounds great. Robert, I want to thank you for joining us and sharing your words.
Thank you so much for the invitation. I really appreciate it. I've turned the light on here now because my son disappeared here in the East Coast. But thank you so much for your hospitality, for the great questions, and for the opportunity to meet with your people. I really much appreciate that.
It's been a delight to have you.
All right, so thank you everybody out there. Tell your friends. This has been episode 42 of the Books and Brews podcast. Cheers.